Deepwater Horizon is nominated for the Academy Award for the Best Visual Effects, and it's clear to see why when we watch the film. The attention to detail, specifically in the explosion scenes, made you wonder, well, how did they do that? Specifically in this shot here. Well, it's actually a mixture of visual and special effects. Visual effects supervisor for the film, Burt Dalton, said in an interview with Cinemovie, "Where we were building the real fire, the electric camera department made a 30 by 30 LED screen, where they photographed some real fire that we gave them, and blew it up to a giant screen, so it would light the whole set as if it was actually on fire. And then that was just covered up with CG fire from a distance, and the LED fire looked like it was really on fire, just from the screen itself." The rest of the fire we see on screen was real fire, controlled and created by Burt Dalton, which was filmed and then later blown up. Industrial Light and Magic, the main company behind the VFX for the film, largely used their own editing software, Plume, to create the explosions in Deepwater Horizon. The program itself comes with thousands of pre-designed explosions. It renders them in, and the artists can tailor them however they like. This is a shot of what the desktop looks like when it's in use. The combined use of traditional and practical effects isn't new to the industry. However, the use of a LED screen creates the real effect that the light of fire would have had on characters' faces, and it looks great on camera. It caused reviewers everywhere to claim that they had felt, and I quote here, engulfed by the flames. And considering that almost all of the fire we see on screen is real fire captured separately in a green screen studio, it gives a new depth of realism during the scenes, in which actors would be passing very close to the fire. There are a number of different health hazards that come with creating real fire, even when working with seasoned professionals. These health risks are considerably reduced when working with CGI fire. Also, there are a number of environmental issues when creating fire to consider which are not present in making CGI fire. For example, what are they burning, and do they have the appropriate permissions? There are no health risks when using CGI fire, and the difference is almost unnoticeable, as it's near enough impossible to tell the difference between the two types of fire when watching the film. So they probably could have stuck with CGI fire. However, using an LED screen was cheap and did create an authentic look of being in the fiery flames on all of the actors' faces. The Jungle Book surprised everyone when it was nominated for the 2017 Oscars Award for Special Effects, but when you watch it, it's clear to see why. One thing I wanted to know when I saw The Jungle Book was how on earth did they do this scene? I understand that the vast majority of this film is filmed in a blue screen studio, but how was Mowgli carried about like that by monkeys that don't exist? Well, in order to get a believable movement of Neil Sethi being carried, they dressed a lot of people up in blue screen suits and literally carried him. Then they had their visual cue for post-production later, and the hard work came in later, which in many ways ran alongside the production of the film because so much of the film was animated. They used Maya animation software to create the complicated animal rigs, and then they used RenderMan software, which was developed by Pixar for the shading and lighting, which was immensely complicated for immersive jungle scenes. One of the most crucial parts of creating realistic CGI animals is getting the fur just right, which includes creating natural movements in real time. In an interview with Inverse, Rob Legato, the VFX editor for the film, said, "They call it grooming, and it's not just the ability to have a million individual hairs that react to light, it also has to be groomed, like the way an animal has patches of hair." Legato explained, "If you put hair on someone's head, it has a wave pattern that your brain sees as real. The grooming was designed to allow you to control to some degree, but also to naturally replicate the wave patterns of hair." One issue with creating animals as realistic as this is the amount of time needed to do so. It would take 30 to 40 hours per frame, and since it's stereo, it requires 2 frames to produce 1 frame of the movie. So you can tell how much of the computer has to figure out exactly what it's doing, how it's bouncing, how much light is being absorbed, because when it hits an object, it gets absorbed and some gets reflected. In the end, the team said it required thousands of computers and eventually moved into the Google Cloud, which took them 3 to 4 days to render every single shot of the film. Although the talking monkeys are clearly CGI creations, The Jungle Book shocked audiences with its impressive visuals. The monkeys never distracted from the story and made this particular effect very special. In this scene, Mowgli directly interacts with the world, adding a deeper level of realism. I personally would have never guessed that it was actually a bunch of people in blue screen. It's not like you could have trained real monkeys to do this, but the huge render time would have added a lot of time and money to the production. Time and money which could have been spent working on other aspects of the film. The sheer amount of CGI in this film forces the effects artists to push the boundaries of realistic imagery, especially when the camera quality is so good. But no new techniques were used in this production, which means there would be no further progress in the industry. Although the huge render time would have cost a lot of money, there is no other current way to animate CGI characters with this much attention to detail, so the Jungle Book made a sacrifice which was worthwhile to the film. Also nominated for the 2017 Academy Award for Best Achievement in Special Effects was Doctor Strange. One effect from Doctor Strange is so easy that you can find hundreds of online tutorials explaining how to do one for yourself. The portal effect isn't a green screen, as you can see from this clip. If the green screen was in the portal, the actor couldn't walk through it, and if it was behind the portal, then you would lose the actual set, which the actor is walking through. The scene would have to be shot from two locations, where the actor is and where he wants to go. The way it could be done is with 2 layers of video and a mask over where the portal is. The actor would be filmed going through both portals respectively and then cut to make it have the illusion that the actor was travelling between this portal. The VFX supervisor, Stephanie Coretti, in an interview with the Animation World Network, said that the 2 programs they used the most throughout production were Maya and Houdini was used specifically for the special effects in the film. However, this effect could also be done with After Effects. This effect was instantly loved by the fans, causing hundreds of people to make video tutorials about how to make the effect for themselves. It's a relatively cheap effect to implement, but it has a very realistic payoff, with reviewers complimenting the film's visuals at every opportunity they've had to. The effect is very hardware intensive, requiring a whole new location for the second half of a scene, which would require a lot of shot and scene planning, which seems unnecessary, as the whole thing could have been done in a green screen studio and would have saved a lot of money. This effect was loved by fans who instantly tried the effect for themselves, but it could have been done a lot cheaper and easier with almost the same results. A lot of the film is green screen, and ironically, the portal scene doesn't distinguish itself enough as a practical effect. One striking visual effect of Ex Machina is Ava itself, a mixture of actor and machine, but the way that they did this was a mixture of old and new tech. The director, Alex Garland, didn't want to use green screens because he wanted it to be a very authentic experience. But Ava was achieved through a number of steps. The actress wore a prosthetic on her head and had a full bald cap on, creating the bald head effect. They used a tight bodysuit, which used a mesh pattern. The mesh was described through as a breakthrough on set because it allowed the VFX artists to see the contours of a naked girl. In their words, so it gives the sense of a girl flickering in your peripheral vision. When designing Ava, the main effects team had to design her in a way that would make it too difficult to film. VFX supervisor Andrew Whitehurst said that the team chose to give Ava a metal plate on her shoulders and armpits because of how difficult rigging shoulder blades can be. Before animating Ava, they had to design every single muscle and bone shape from the actor and then use a 3D printer to print it off to see if it fit together correctly and worked before animating it. When directing Ava, together the team would use a RenderMan feature called image-based lighting, which allowed them to render in 3D models in their respective counterparts. And at Double Negative, they have their own physically based shading pipeline, which allowed them to create realistic lighting changes. The outside of the rig was created by photo booth scanning in the actor and creating a CG model. To create the inside of the rig, the mechanical parts and ribbons were rendered via Double Negative's Physically Plausible Rendering Pipeline, which uses RenderMan. Physically plausible gives you that photographic quality that you can't get any other way, says Whitehurst. You can get beautiful renderings not using this approach, but they have a painted quality. They don't feel as photographic, especially when you're dealing with very known materials. Those known materials were replicated with shaders for things such as aluminium, chrome, silver and steel. Ava looks incredible and the scene transition looks great considering they would have had to render in Ava each scene manually. The inclusion of the human actor's face for Ava helps create the character development and adds to the story, making the character itself more recognizable and believable, and avoiding the uncanny valley. And also, considering most of Ava is really there, it means the team would have had saved time editing out the whole character before rendering in a totally CG character. The mesh was an entirely new idea for the industry. The mesh idea is great for the industry, however it is very specific. It would only be necessary in certain situations. Human-like robot is one of these specific situations. The mesh would be useless when working with other, partly CGI characters. Also, some of Ava's insides loses quality in some scenes, especially when her CGI body is interacting with human characters. The film deserved to win the Oscar considering how well Ava was done. It made a lot of advancements in rigging tech, and combining them with an actor hasn't been done on this scale. Meticulous work for the director is instantly noticeable, and the effect was done very, very well. Nominated for the 2017 VFX Academy Award, Rogue One saw some beautiful visual effects. One in particular was a character who I found really stunning, K2SO. There were many times where I wondered if K2SO was actually a model, but it turned out the whole thing was a CG character, so I wondered just how they got such realistic, almost perfect textures. K2SO was a creation of ILM, and was created using optical passive motion capture and CGI. Optical passive motion capture is the process of recording the movement of people using a suit with reference points, which would have allowed the animators to know where to computer animate in K2SO. Even though ILM would have made a number of models of K2SO for referencing, he's a fully digital character. For every shot of Rogue One, ILM would have had to have removed the actor doing mocap, then created a clean plate where there is nobody in the shot, and then animate in K2SO, and all of the interactions which he had during the scene. The mocap's actor's real-life interaction would have created a lot more work for the animators, as they have to animate in all of the actions of K2SO. However, it would have given a more authentic effect. K2SO would be made of multiple digital layers in the film. These layers would have all had pre-rendered properties, such as glass, mirror, fabric, rubber, plastic, metal, and painted metal. And as the film progresses, ILM would have had to meticulously track every single frame until we had our CGI character. Optical passive motion capture is the most common form of mocap because it works very well. It allows for a lot of flexibility without any unnecessary wires or battery packs. ILM did work with very old methods, but they mastered them in order to perfect this character, which is a great advantage considering the character is a robot. When we see how divisive the CGI characters of Leia and Tarkin was in the film, it's clear to see that the fact it wasn't a human and didn't have a human face was an advantage, allowing it to avoid the uncanny valley. One disadvantage is that this method of VFX isn't anything new, nor is it doing anything else to change the industry. The only thing that makes K2SO stand out is the advancement in computing power, which allows artists to render in more realistic textures using more information. This CGI character was a very impressive effect, and shows where the industry is moving with regards to CGI characters. Not new techniques, but tech that can carry more information. The render time on a film like Rogue One must have been enormous, but it was worth it for such a realistic looking character with such a realistic looking robot body. Game of Thrones has one of the highest budgets of any TV shows, so it makes sense that they would have had some excellent special effects. In 2016 we saw the biggest battle the TV show had ever had, and one scene in particular looked amazing, where Jon stood facing the cavalry. So how did they do it? Well, it's all real. Horsemaster Camilla Napros was apparently complaining that she didn't have enough work to do during the previous seasons, so producers David Benioff and D.B. Weiss asked her to provide 80 horses to charge at Kit Harington, which Camilla called adventurous, and said that it was the biggest amount of horse requirement that they have ever had on Game of Thrones. All of the shots were taken by a special rig, a Russian arm camera tracking vehicle with a remote control arm which sat on a Land Rover. This looks amazing because it's real. And according to the BBC, the industry as a whole is moving towards more traditional effects. For example, when J.J. Abrams was asked about what sort of approach he would take to the CGI in The Force Awakens, he said he would take a more traditional approach and have less CGI, which was met with a loud applause. This is because traditional effects do look a lot more natural. We see that from previous examples, and they feel more real in period pieces specifically, which is why fans celebrate them. Legendary special effects editor Ray Harryhausen, in an interview with the BBC, once said, "Making traditional models is a very challenging skill, and it is definitely harder than making models in CGI, where you can call up textures, colours, etc. almost immediately. Plus, there are all physical constraints on building models. How big does it need to be to produce a convincing scale? Can it be transported? How does it have to be engineered to break apart or explode in a certain way? Will it be able to be supported on rods or from wires? Will it have to move convincingly?" The main problem with using traditional effects is that, depending on how complicated the requirement is, it can be far more difficult, costly, and time-consuming than using traditional CGI. This is a beautiful effect, which required a lot of work, but if we saw the industry move slowly towards this kind of effect, overall it would end up costing a lot more money, but it would be a lot worth it to have effects as good and as clear as this one.